Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the 905er. Looking at the federal polls, it is clear that change is coming to Canada, especially in the 905. If most recent polls are to be taken as true, then the 905 is poised to see a massive shift to the right during the next federal election. It seems that Canadians en masse want Pierre Poilievre to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Now, we know to our listeners that phrase seems absurd or alarmist. However, it would be a disservice to ourselves and you, our listeners, to not look at the facts head on. Consistently, polls from various sources are indicating an electorate that increasingly wants a conservative government. Roland and I were puzzled as to why the data indicated a massive change was happening in our region, yet we couldn't find anyone who mirrored that back to us. No one we talked to indicated an enthusiasm for Minister Pierre Poilievre. We also recognize the fact that we live in the age of social media bubbles. We decided that we needed to find new sources to talk to about this coming shift. To that end, we cast a big net to see if we could find someone who is giving the Conservatives a good look this coming election and wanted change. This wasn't scientific nor a comprehensive process, but it was us stepping outside of our bubble to find a different perspective. Our guest today agreed to come on and share her perspective on the change that is happening in the 905 and why she believes Canadians are fed up with Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government. Kerri Black is a Hamiltonian and entrepreneur, a mother and wife who self-professed no political allegiance before the last few years. Today, she's agreed to come on and discuss why she is shifting to the right.
Hi, I'm Connie Thiessen, the host of Broadcast Dialogue, the podcast. We focus on Canada and the challenges facing Canadian radio and TV, as well as highlighting those moving the industry forward from podcasting and streaming to new broadcast tech. Check us out at broadcastdialogue.com or your favorite podcast app.
Okay. Thank you, Kerri Black, for taking the time from her very busy schedule to come on to the 905er podcast today to talk, to give us a kind of a chance to kind of go outside our comfort zone and or outside our bubble and see what other people are thinking about the state of affairs in the 905. Kerri, thank you very much for coming on today.
Hello, how are you? Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So you got in touch with us because a friend of yours had saw that I was soliciting average person responses to what's looking like a massive political shift in the 905 region, and you reached out to say that you're one of those people who are giving that shift a lot of consideration, and I'd like to know kind of your thoughts. When you look at that, what are your concerns or what's your feeling towards that shift that you're seeing coming down the pipe, so to speak?
I would say that, to be honest, the shift is not just 905. I feel the shift, whether it's provincially and federally, and I think unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I do believe that each level of government should not be the same, just for variety purposes. But I would say that people are leaning more conservative or more right, or however you want to put it, because of this grand scheme picture of, whether it's federal or provincial. I think that in the 905 area, I mean, we don't necessarily elect our city ward councillors based on their previous parties, federally or provincially. But people are kind of sick of the the being told how to live, what to do, in big terms of how you run your business, who you're allowed to be around. And, we saw that through the pandemic, and it's shifting people more right, because I think the pandemic really had, and the way it was run, really had an effect on how everybody views politics overall. not just citywide.
So you mentioned the pandemic there, and I get the sense that that's my sense that event shifted a lot of political allegiances around.
Definitely.
Is that something you think that from your personal standpoint that happened to you, that changed your
Absolutely.
views?
Absolutely. I think we have a mayor who was the leader of the NDP, who, when you look at her provincial, record, she really tried to push mandates and lockdowns. And that's something that, looking back now, because it took a while for me to get there, but looking back now, with, the background of actually having COVID-19 and getting the vaccine and all those things, I look at her now and think that is not somebody I want representing my city, because even though she doesn't make those rules now, she is that person who pushed a lot of that narrative and the fear mongering, and even through her campaign really pushed the fear mongering with masking and all that. And I don't feel like that, aligns with how I want my city to be viewed outside of.
Okay, but so all right, let's talk about the pandemic then. So clearly, from what I'm taking from this is you didn't agree with the lockdown choices, and you didn't agree with mask mandates that were imposed during the pandemic. Is that
so? Funny enough, is that actually in the beginning, yeah, I was like, stay home, put on your mask,
right?
stay, for sure. But no, yeah, eventually I woke up, as I like to call it, as a lot of people like to call it, and absolutely not. And even post pandemic, just watching her campaign for mayor, she held on to that fear mongering and the demographic. I don't know if that's the right word. The group of people in our city who would need her to push those things because their fears,
So I was just wondering, I mean, so back in it seems like a long time ago now, and obviously the masking issue was obviously very, very divisive, and it does seem to have and across the world, really, we're not just talking about Canada, it seems to have had an impact on politics, and in Canada it seems to have sort of stuck. But if you think about it, who was it who mandated that we wear masks? Was it the federal government or was it the provincial government? And I mean, my understanding is it was actually the province was the one that was saying wear masks. Well, so why aren't we blaming Doug Ford then?
Well, let's go there. So
okay.
Yes, it was provincial, and actually it wasn't even provincial. There was provincial mandates that, you go into a business, you had to wear a mask or whatever, but there were mandates on businesses to create a COVID-19 policy. And that's the slippery slope of Doug Ford, right? Is that he will, I feel like he salts things and then waits for everybody else to season it, kind of like he puts out very like vague information. He tiptoes around and then has a lot of like, shady deals going background. But, in terms of who made the rules, sure, provincially, it came down to provincial, but there are people behind the scenes. And this is a big thing of politics that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand. And this is why, again, I don't want to say I necessarily align with either or party, is because whoever is in front, whoever their leader is, their boss is, whatever, they are the puppets. They are being told, what to say, what to rule. They're only really a face. Same with Justin Trudeau or Ford, or even maybe Andrea Horwath. And I understand that, as mayor, she's stepped into a big role, but she essentially still has city ward councillors who make the decisions. And so, yes, I guess Doug Ford provincially made those rules, but that was handed down. And all of the information was handed down. And I think at the time, everybody was kind of just doing what they thought was best based on the information they had. Same with like me in the beginning. Yeah, I masked, I stayed away, I did what I had to do.
Did you have any relatives or anybody in your family or friends who was, hospitalized with COVID-19? Anybody who died as a result?
I do. On both. Yeah. So I do have a friend. Well, it's my cousin's father-in-law passed away with COVID-19. There's a difference in how we say that, right? And we, after 2021, 22, started to hear that from the province that there was a difference between dying because of COVID-19 and with COVID-19. And I think that was a big difference. So he died with COVID-19 for sure, but this was a man who was a heavy smoker, or was a smoker. He every year was hospitalized with pneumonia. There was medical issues in there. And so in terms of, did he die from COVID-19? Well, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I wasn't there. How it was reported, I didn't push that information from the family, but did he die during COVID-19 and have COVID-19 when he passed away? Yes.
And to an extent, this isn't what we're talking about on this episode, but I mean, I guess I would just ask the question. I mean, one of the most important things, and I think a message that maybe was lost during this whole thing, was that, what we were trying to do was stop the hospitals being overloaded. So it's like, yeah, we may all get COVID-19 eventually, but let's not all get it this 6 months.
And go to the hospital at the same time.
So by masking, by taking precautions, by staying home, we can keep those levels at acceptable, Now, again, we're not here to sort of relitigate that whole thing.
Let's not debate that.
Sure, but I mean, if you think that basically every level of government was unified at that time, the unity went away fairly quickly. But for 6 months or so, certainly maybe longer, every level of government was agreeing that this was the best approach. Is it really fair now to sort of point at, say, Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister and say, you're the dictator, you're the guy who's ruined everything, and by choosing a different party, it feels like whichever party was in government at that time probably would have done the same thing, judging by the evidence we're looking at. Or do you think I'm wrong there?
For the record, I don't like Justin Trudeau. I do think he's leading as a dictator. That's just for the record.
We'll touch on that later, because that is something I want to go down. But please, your thought.
But no, I think that if we're looking at the 905, let's think of the 905 here. I think that the issue here is that people don't understand the level of governments, and so they're leaning more conservative. Now, it doesn't matter how they're leaning right now when it comes to the 905, because we just elected our mayor, who was NDP, who I actually think, in terms of my 905 area, my MPP is Monique Taylor. She's NDP, and she's amazing. She's lovely. She does great things for our community. My community is blessed to have her. My city ward councillor would be conservative leaning. She's Esther Pauls. She's amazing. She's, great to reach out to, answers her phone. But I think in terms of how our city is leaning, the question is, are we asking how they're leaning for city issues, or are we asking how they're leaning federally?
Okay. So what I'm getting the sense from your political evolution, I guess is the best way to point it, is that during the pandemic, you started questioning a lot of things that all levels of government were doing, implementing. Why were they doing it? Which I think anyone should do. Now, you mentioned just now that you don't like Justin Trudeau because you think he's dictatorial. And this is something I hear a lot. And I genuinely, since I have you here, I want to know, what is it about him that is so dictatorial? Because I'll be honest, I don't see it. I understand why people don't like him. But that is a pretty bold assertion to make about the Prime Minister. And I want to know why you think that that's the case.
Okay. Let's start with how he spoke about Canadians in general when people started rolling into Ottawa. People went there looking for his attention, because I am a person, I didn't go to Ottawa, but I am a person who has called their office. I've called my own Liberal constituents or MP's office, never get a response. And it comes across as, well, you don't agree with me. You don't believe the things I believe. And so I'm not answering to you. You are told what to do and you follow my rules or else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it comes down to, like, when he said, the people rolling into Ottawa are often racist, misogynistic. How does he know that? Because they don't agree with his vaccine mandates. And that's something that he was dictating that every truck driver and every person to work, in certain things had to do. And if you don't like it and you don't follow those rules and you don't agree with that, then you're this, and this. And also,
Okay. So
we're going to impose these mandates on you, whether you lose your business or you can't take your kids out or whatever you want,
So I take it you supported the convoy then?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you do know that Justin Trudeau didn't actually impose any convoy mandate. It was the American government that did it. The American government said you can't enter our country unless you're vaccinated.
I understand that, but this is again where I'm saying that we have this idea that rules are made without interference or influence or agreeance. And there was the same here. You couldn't come into Canada. You couldn't cross across the country without the vaccines. And so there were mandates that were restricting people without American influence.
So here's the thing. I've had family who lives in Ottawa through the convoy. None of them have said they welcomed them there. None of them have said that they wanted them there. We had protests all throughout the 905. I know I've driven by many protests outside of hospitals, outside of MPP's offices, protesting mask mandates and all that. And that's nobody argued against that. But there was a sense, from what I talked with people in Ottawa, there was a sense that this had crossed a line from peaceful protest to we're getting into rough territory. We've had on Flavio Volpe, who took the convoy to court to get them to remove the blockade at the Windsor border and whatnot. And so I wonder, like, why do you think Trudeau did here? Better phrase it this way: why are you angry with Doug Ford for not putting in the police, the necessary police force to quell or to maintain order?
Why aren't I?
Yeah, like why?
I never said I wasn't. I don't like
so. Okay, no, fair enough. But like, so you're upset because Justin Trudeau said, okay, enough's enough. I'm invoking the Emergency Act. We're shutting this thing down because people in Ottawa are saying, I'm sick and tired. I can't sleep. I can't go out. I am tired. Enough's enough. We're shutting this down because Doug Ford didn't want to call in necessary police to maintain order. I am generally curious, like why anger with why the focus on Trudeau? Why this visceral anger towards Trudeau for him saying, I'm just enough's enough. We've had a month and a half of this. Let's get over with it.
Let me start by saying that my I don't want to call it, I'm not angry with Justin Trudeau. I don't like it, right?
No, fair enough.
But I don't hold any anger because, in all fairness, I move how I move. I live my life. I run my business the way I run my business, and I don't care what their rules are. And this is something I learned because of the convoy. So when I blame Trudeau for things that went wrong with the convoy, I mean, how many weeks were there? Why did he not one time, just once, he didn't have to be outside with them. He could have stood outside Parliament, guarded behind the gates, and had a press conference and just show face, just show that I am your leader. I hear you. We will, we are understanding that we have a difference here. We are going to work collectively with our governments, with our oppositions, and we will work. He said nothing. He did nothing. Okay. He hid. And then when he chose to speak, he was insulting. And for the record, the Emergencies Act has now been deemed illegal. And should have never happened. And if they handled it properly in the first place, knowing people were rolling into Ottawa, knowing that there was cross-country support, then I don't think they would have stayed as long as they did. And it didn't necessarily mean that they had to stay until there was change. I know lots of people who went there who weren't truckers, who weren't crossing the border, and it wasn't necessarily about that. I think the whole thing was handled poorly, whether it was provincial or federal. And I think this is a big reason why so many people in the 905 or elsewhere, I think worldwide, actually, if you really look at it, are leaning conservative because it started there. A lot of people started to look at how Ottawa was handled, how the convoy was handled, and thought, that's not sitting well with me. And then started digging into why. And I'm one of those people because I until that moment, I did all the things I was told to do. I did all the things. I followed all the rules. And when that happened and people started rolling into Ottawa, truckers or not, how he handled it, how Chrystia Freeland handled it, how Doug Ford handled it, really made me take a step back and go, okay, something's not right here. And that's when I started to learn about outside influences.
So tell us a little bit about you. I mean, you're based in Hamilton, and you're a business owner, is that right?
I am, yeah.
And so tell us a bit about your business. I mean, how have say the current federal government's policies sort of directly impacted your business sort of day to day? I mean, did you, and I mean, that could be a good thing in a good way or a bad way. I mean, did you take advantage of any of the funding situation during, I can't remember all the names have gone out of my head. I apologize. The various sort of business supports that happened during COVID, or have there been other things that actively hurt your business?
So we own Black Diamond Concrete and Drain Specialists. We do a lot of work for new builds, custom homes. And so during the pandemic, lockdowns where a lot of people couldn't work, we're very fortunate because we were in home building to have been able to work. Now, granted, everything slowed down. The price of wood went up, for our farms and concrete went up. Everything went up, right? We all know that, and has only risen since. But in terms of actually working, we're very blessed to have been able to work still through COVID-19. I would say that, the slowdown to building homes happened, of course, because one at a time trades had to go in, and then there had been time, and then the next person had to go in, and not too many people on site. So, that was a pain in the ass. But that was the kind of the kickoff to how business has slowed. Now, again, we're very fortunate we have great contracts and things like that. But if you look now, because of inflation, because of interest rates, because of mortgage rates, home building is super slow. Nobody can afford to buy a home right now, especially not brand new. I don't want to say nobody, but most people for sure. We have this massive housing crisis. I feel like it's countrywide, but I personally see it here in Hamilton. Obviously, I know you guys must see this too. Because if people can't afford homes that have been built, in the 80s and the 70s and however, imagine trying to buy a home now. I bought my house in 2014 for about $340, let's say about $344. This house now, yes, we've done renovations, but would sell for close to $1 million. And that to me is just mind-boggling. Imagine buying a brand new home and then trying to furnish it. So construction work, not just ours, but construction work in new homes has completely slowed down when our federal government is promising to, get houses built. We got to work on the housing crisis. And I'm looking at that as somebody who works in that field going, that's a bunch of bull, because none of that is happening. It's completely slowed down.
Okay.
Right. And yes, I did take advantage of CERB. So we did take one of the CERB loans.
Okay.
It came to us. It actually is interesting that it came to us in a letter offering it. Right. And I remember thinking well, how do I do this? There wasn't a whole lot of how do I actually apply for this? How much do I actually get? When do I pay this back? Kind of thing. It was kind of this is available to you. Here it is. This is how you apply for it, kind of. And I remember reaching out to my accountant and saying hey, do we take this? Do we know what it's going to be? And he's like, listen, take it. Don't touch it. Put it in an account, hold on to it, don't touch it. So we actually just paid it back like 2 weeks ago. I didn't touch it. We got 40,000 sat there. It's been paid back. We haven't used it. We never dipped into it. And we're very grateful and very, very blessed to not have been able to or needed to do that. But it never sat well with me. Like, how are all these people getting money, offered money, but there's not a whole lot of information? And actually, even paying it back, when I logged into my online banking a couple of weeks ago, I saw a due date on it, February, I think it was February 4th. And I thought, that's in like 4 days. How come no one sent me a letter? I've got all these letters from CRA. You owe this, you owe this, you owe this, but not that. And I thought that was weird. And so I called my bank and I said, I'm just going to put it back into there and they'll just pull it. And even then I had no idea how I'm paying this back. And then the next day it was gone. Like it came across in my account as a loan. The loan was gone. And I was like, even that, I can understand now somebody who doesn't work in an office, who doesn't run a business, who doesn't look at numbers and QuickBooks, for example, all day, would struggle to pay that back because there was no transparency. And that's a big part of this, why people are leaning right.
So let's go further down this path then. So you're clearly leaning federally to supporting Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives federally.
Absolutely.
What is it about Pierre Poilievre that you find attractive?
Okay. Can I ask? I'm going to ask a question because, again, I didn't really look into you guys. Are either of you parents? Do you have kids?
Yeah.
100%. My first standpoint with Pierre is that he's more considerate of parental rights. Definitely a big one is that he answers the damn question.
What's the question does he answer?
All the questions. I mean, if you look at them, let's call it debating. Every time he asks a question, it's avoided. Every time he puts out a number,
is Trudeau, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, you mean Trudeau when you say a question's avoided?
Oh, absolutely. Well, all of them. Do you not find every?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Even myself, I randomly ran into to Lisa Hefner at the park. And I just wanted to ask her some questions. And I left there and looked at my husband and he said, how dumb do you feel right now? And I said,
okay, so
I have no idea what we just talked about. Like,
well here's the question. I don't find Pierre Poilievre answers any questions. I've seen him in front of reporters ask him questions, and I don't get a straight answer from him. And I'm wondering when you listen to him speak, what specifics do you take away in terms of a plan of action to address your needs? Because I hear platitudes, I don't hear specifics. I'm wondering, I think this is what I want to get into. You're hearing something different than what I'm hearing, and I want to know what you're hearing when you hear him speak.
I hear a lot of common sense, and I know that that's his lingo, right? He uses the common sense a lot, but I hear common sense. When he talks about building homes, the amount of time it takes to get permits in, years, the amount of funding that goes to mainstream media, I hear that. And I agree with that. The amount of funding that goes to CBC, the amount of buildings that Rogers and CBC owns in Toronto that are, for what? We have people sleeping on the sidewalks. And he says, I will take those buildings and I will convert them to homes, or I will help the city build. I heard that. When he talks about permits, I hear that because as somebody in construction, the amount of time it takes to get a permit to actually get work done is ridiculous. It's a bunch of bureaucracy.
We can certainly, sorry, Joel,
go ahead.
We can certainly speak to that whole situation. But
our bread and butter.
No, and I mean, it does. It takes years and years and years to build anything.
It's ridiculous because I can tell you that we have more trades ever to just get their hands dirty.
But isn't the point that all those regulations, all that legislation that makes that happen is all provincial? It's not a single word of it is anything to do with the federal government. The federal government can't touch it.
Well, okay, and
they might say they're going to, but I mean they can't.
Right, and here's what I again am coming back to. in terms of what's city, what's provincial, what's federal, there is a massive misunderstanding, not between us, but a massive misunderstanding in general public of who's in charge of what. And so when you're asking me, why is the 905 leaning more conservative? I think it's because so many people disapprove and disagree with federal liberals. And so they don't necessarily understand that you're right. Permits and things like that, building permits come provincial.
But I mean, if you're looking to Pierre Poilievre to make a change, what can, you know, in all honesty, what can Pierre Poilievre do as Prime Minister that would be different to Justin Trudeau that would get rid of permits for you?
I don't think it'll necessarily get rid of permits, but I do feel like if Doug Ford had a federal conservative, his stance on a lot of things would change. I think that he's slimy enough to just kind of do what he thinks is going to keep getting him paid. I think that he doesn't necessarily stand. He's not a true conservative, and so he'll do again what I think he thinks he has to do to get paid, to grease the wheels. And if he had someone with a conservative background, he would do that as well. But
do you think Doug Ford has any motivation? I mean, given what happened with the Green Belt thing, where what the allegation is that basically he's doing deals with his developer buddies.
Totally believe it.
Yeah.
Personally.
So given that, isn't his entire motivation, isn't his character as premier since 2018, that he'll do anything he can to reduce that red tape, to get rid of those permits? And that's pretty much what, insofar as his government has a sort of guiding principle, it's make things easier for developers. I mean, I feel like that's a fair thing to say about him. I don't think he'd really dispute that. And yet we've still got all these delays. So it just seems, I'm just questioning how you can kind of say, well, this is a reason to support Poilievre when even the most developer-friendly premier you're probably ever going to get can't do anything about it, or isn't doing anything about it.
I missed what I was going to say there. I need to wag my finger. Hold on.
Take your time. We'll edit this part out.
I talked to my city ward councillor about that briefly back in, I feel like it was late summer 22. And we discussed, this expansion in Hamilton. We're going to have a lot of buildings going up. I know on the corner of Stone Church and Upper James, right behind Lime Ridge Mall. I think they're building one at Upper Wentworth and Rymel. There's just going to be a lot of buildings because we have so much immigration and for nowhere for people to go. So, I mean, immigration is a federal. However, building, is provincial and comes down to working with municipalities. So, again, what are we going to do? I mean, if you can't build past Rymel Road. And I think this was I'll be completely transparent here, is I knew that this Greenbelt issue, he was going to get tied up. I didn't really look into it as much because he's slimy to me. And I just know that we've got a lot of really strong, smart people pushing up against him. So, but in terms of moving past Rymel, my city ward councillor talked about how they're going to get a lot of pushback, but you have to, there's a lot of people out there around pumps and cisterns. So you have to get the work rolling. And if you don't, where does everybody go? I think we're at this kind of collision standpoint right now where, if we're going to talk about what's happening citywide, or we're going to talk what's happening provincially, we have to understand that federal influences that. Whether the federal makes that decision or not, everything comes down to they have to work collaboratively together. And right now we have, a liberal prime minister, a conservative premier, and then an NDP mayor, a new Democratic mayor. And in my opinion, I don't think they're working well together. I think ideally it would be nice to have, a little bit of everything, but they're just not working well together because there's so much chaos and so much commotion that they're just, there's a lot of, I like to call it flabbergasted issues happening.
One of the reasons why I was kind of excited to have you on, Kerri, is the fact that you are an entrepreneur and a business owner. And this is something I always I can't square myself around when people say they like Pierre Poilievre because he's gonna help solve the affordability crisis and we're all gonna go back to work and all this. What's your opinion of the fact that Pierre Poilievre has never held a job outside of politics? He graduated from university at the age of 25 and got a six-figure job. He has no accomplishments in the House of Commons. He's passed no bills, no legislation. His claim to fame is that he was the Democratic Reform Minister, and the one thing that he tried to get passed, which was to rig the Conservatives to have a leg up on every election since, failed. You're somebody who's you work to build your business. You've worked to build a successful business.
Yeah.
I'm just like, you're an accomplished woman, and I'm wondering, like, why do you think Pierre Poilievre, we're going to put him in charge of the country, and this man has essentially just failed up all of his life. What's the appeal of that to you?
When you word it that way, it's not a whole lot, but
well, that's how I view it. I just can't square that away. It's like, this guy's never actually worked.
Get it, but here's the thing: he's a politician. He's a politician through and through. Always has been, always will be. That's where he has been. And I don't think that Justin Trudeau's teaching background and drama teaching has helped our policies either. And it's not so much that I necessarily support or want Pierre Poilievre to be our prime minister, because I did vote for the leader of the Conservative Party, and I didn't vote him as my number one option. I actually voted Leslyn Lewis as my number one option because she's a lawyer, she's a doctor, she's a mother. She comes from personal experience. She's also in Ontario. Those are things I like. She's approachable, she's speakable. Anyways, I digress. It wasn't necessarily that I want Pierre Poilievre to be our prime minister because I think he's going to get the job done. I don't. I think every politician in their own way, once they before or once they become leader of whatever, are just as corrupt as the next one and can easily be swayed and paid to do and say what they're told. And we saw this with Pierre this week, actually, with Danielle Smith making the new laws on parental rights and hormone blockers and things like that. You know, that's a conservative stance, and he waited, right? He waited till everybody had said their piece and given their opinion and supported or not supported. Then he said something. And this is something we see a lot with Pierre. Is not necessarily that he's the leader and he's going to be, the hero. No, he waits. He listens to his cabinet. He talks to his people, and he attacks the issues and comes up with not necessarily solutions, but he knows what to say about the things that people are irritated about. And so do I necessarily care that Pierre Poilievre is the leader? No, but I do think we need to move federally conservative.
So here's
actually, just sorry, Joe, just sort of just jump in again there. Just the thing that I hear him talk about, and you've touched on these, and I think maybe we should look at them head on rather than sort of escape past them. And so one of those is, you mentioned that the kind of what you described as parental rights, which I suspect maybe has a lot to do with the kind of trans debate, and also the issue of immigration. Now, those are things that both seem to be concerns that one way or another is brought up by the Conservatives. Are those things do you feel that those are going to be key issues at the next election?
100%.
And yeah. So you mean, do you say, for instance, are you someone who thinks, like there's an agenda of teachers trying to convert all our children to be trans or something going on, or there are, immigration needs to be stopped, or are these things that you would support?
No, actually, I used to work for the board, and I have most of my friends are teachers. We have some amazing teachers in Hamilton. We have some really great schools and principals. I wouldn't say that teachers are necessarily pushing a trans agenda. And I think that's a big part of why there's so much division, right? That's one part of it. There's a big gray area that people aren't talking about, because that's what gets people heated, right? It's a deep conversation, and to be fair, it's nobody's business what happens in another person's home with their parents and their children. When it comes to our teachers pushing a trans agenda, that's a broad statement. I wouldn't say teachers. I would say there are teachers, absolutely. And we saw that in Toronto. There was a grade 5 teacher who put on the class Twitter page on Easter that my Jesus is trans. Now, this is kind of, for me anyways, I'm not sure about everybody else, but this is where this kind of really sparked my interest as a parent, because this is Ontario. And he was teaching in a Catholic school.
Yeah, it's funny the things that we object about. I find something objectionable in that statement. Yeah, not necessarily the trans bit. Well, I mean, I don't particularly give a crap about the trans bit. The bit about Jesus annoys me. But anyway, carry on. I'm just interrupting.
Right.
Sorry.
What about that annoys you?
Well, I personally, I don't think the state has any business teaching people religion, and I don't think there should be a separate school system.
Completely. I used to very much agree with that until these issues started to come around, and now I'm forever grateful that my kids go to a Catholic school, because those issues are taken out more. And so, that is a good statement, that not necessarily school should be teaching religion, and that's just as much a personal choice as your sexual orientation or anything else. However, if in terms of choose this or choose this, public or Catholic, I'm thankful I chose Catholic, because my kids aren't learning that, they gender roles are based on your body parts, and you can choose your sexual orientation and gender at kindergarten. So
the concern I know a lot of people have, I'll kind of put my cards on the table with this, is to bring it back to the federal issue. Is we've covered a lot of the topics that Pierre Poilievre is campaigning on, essentially housing affordability and whatnot. And we've talked to a lot of experts, economists and grassroots poverty activists and developers, et cetera, and said, like, how do we solve this? And it's a complicated issue. It is, yeah. We do not have the time to go into it. But I find Pierre's simplistic messaging disingenuous. That because here's the thing: Trudeau's doing what he wants to do, take on the gatekeepers, and he wants to give money to cities based on you've got to provide so much housing. My worry is this: that simplistic approach isn't going to work unless he comes out and says, I'm going to actually build housing. Like, I'm actually going to put like brick and mortar affordable housing. Then that might be a game changer. My worry is this. I don't hear any specifics. I hear a lot of platitudes, and I hear a lot of, ironically, I hear a lot of what Justin Trudeau said in 2015, but from a conservative point of view. And I find that things aren't going to get done because it's simplistic. I know for a fact we've talked with many counselors in the 905 and mayors who are saying, don't tell us what to do, federal government. Get off our backs and don't tell us. But Pierre's going to say, I'm going to tell you. So I'm seeing a lot of confrontation coming along down the pipeline if he gets elected, which means nothing gets done. We're still square one. My worry then is we stopped talking about these real issues: affordability, housing, immigration. We stopped talking about that because that's too hard to deal with. Instead, we switch over to the parental rights debate, as you said, where, quite frankly, I'm of the mindset of it's a medical opinion. It's a medical decision between a doctor and their patient, and the parents should be involved, but there's no such thing as parental rights. I do not have a right over my children. I have a responsibility to care for them, to protect them, feed them, clothe them. They have a right to be, I can't force them to do anything. They have their own rights. Well, they do, because we have an entire ministry geared towards taking kids away from parents. There's a Ministry of Children's Services. That's their entire job is, you abuse your kid, we take you away.
Okay, but there's a big difference between abusing your child and objecting to a gender transition.
Might be. But that's where I don't think the state has anything to do with that. to insert, because I agree
Well,
that's
it
a
does, because it comes down to the Ministry of Health. Then you get,
do you not know,
stuff.
like, nobody, like when a child says I want to transition, it's not like an overnight thing, like they just go down to the hospital and it's like, okay, we'll sign you up for the procedure. It's a long, complicated, like it takes years, and there's a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists that are involved to say, are you sure you want to do this? Are you
I'm not
sure?
going to debate this with you. I disagree.
But
To be honest, I'm
well,
not disagree on how it's happening.
But my point is just that I find that Pierre's going to capitalize on that. And I know for a fact there will be kids who will feel harmful. There are parents who will say, you're harming my kid because you're making them say they're wrong, they're broken, they're wrong. There are parents who want this, like, to be able to say, I want to have the right, or to have that ability to say, this is what's best for my child. Nobody's forcing transitions on anyone. That's what I find, this is just, this argument, this conversation is disingenuous.
You don't feel that the option for transitioning has risen because of social influences?
I think it's a left-handed argument. I think it's the fact that we now say it's okay if you identify as a trans person. Mm-hmm. You don't have to hide who you are.
Yeah.
And
nobody's saying wrong.
But
I'm not saying that's wrong.
I know.
Sorry.
I'm not accusing you, but there are people who are. When we've talked, I've reached out to trans parents of trans students, and I ask, like, who's pressuring you to do this? Is there? And it's like, they're not. It's a journey for them. This isn't like an overnight thing. And I find that it's one of these cases where the government really does just need to step out and say, this is a decision between a doctor and a patient, and they have to sort it out. It's no different than than a doctor saying to you as a woman, you can't have the right to an abortion because we think you need to do that. It's the equivalent argument in my opinion.
Okay, so the issue here to me is that you're looking at this as black or white, and there's a lot of gray area.
I do think there's gray area, and that's why I think the government needs to step out.
Well, I think that the government needs to step in, however, not in a black and white stance, right?
The government doesn't operate in gray areas. They operate in black and white. It is, you can do this or you can't. And I find, like,
well, then in terms of which side I'm leaning on, I'm leaning conservative.
I get it. I get it.
And I don't think I'm alone. And that's why I decided to come on and discuss this, because if we're looking at our 905 area, why are people leaning conservative? It's because the Trudeau government, the left, have made it so much telling people what to do.
Okay, so this is where I still can't grasp my head around it. And so at the start of this, you said that you started down this journey towards embracing the conservative government because you didn't like the fact that the Trudeau government or the Ford government was imposing mandates and telling us we had to wear a mask, we had to get vaccinated, we had to do this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're thinking the next major issue of the next election will be parental rights, where the government is saying you cannot do this to your body. You cannot get this done to your body. And like,
we're talking about children, right? We're not talking about adults.
We're talking about families, parents who say, my kid wants to do this and I want to allow them to do it. And you're saying it's okay for the government to say, nope, can't do it. We can't allow this to happen. And I'm going, why? So like, square these two things for me.
The difference here is that I oppose an adult telling another adult what they have to do. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about children making decisions. And if the family or the parent doesn't affirm that or agree with that, then that child,
I guess, I mean,
but a child has a right to make those decisions. Yeah. The child has a right. And that we don't like, I don't.
And I know
it doesn't matter. That's what the charter says.
Okay, let me just jump in here a second. So
I understand that legally the child has a right. I'm saying personally, I disagree with that. Now, whether that's legal or not, I don't care. Yeah. They're my kids. So we will make that decision.
We spoke to former Premier Kathleen Wynne a few months ago on this issue, and obviously you're not going to be surprised where the which end of the spectrum her perspective came from.
Mhm.
However, I mean, we spoke on that episode. I mean, like I spoke on that episode about how my own kind of opinions had started in one place and then moved. And my initial thought was, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like parents are the ones who are in charge here. Like that the parents make, we should be second guessing parents. And that seems like the most reasonable thing in the world. And
Yeah.
then the thing that started to move my opinion was thinking how, we're assuming when we say something like that all parents are perfect. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, not all parents are perfect.
absolutely.
And there are parents who are, uh, you know, I'm hoping that if you're not someone who would dispute that some children are gay, some
No,
are
absolutely
gay,
not.
some are lesbian, some are trans.
Absolutely not.
So for those students, say they have a parent who is very, very strictly religious for whatever reason, and
Yeah.
a teacher comes to them and says, "Your child wants to come out as gay, or they want to come out
Yes.
as trans."
How does the
The-
teacher know? You're
Because
assuming
the
that the
child,
child went to the
I'll tell
teacher.
you how they know. It's because the children tell them.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's my
then
question.
then that teacher would be under a legal obligation to go to a parent. This is under the kind of
Yeah.
Alberta system. They would then be legally obliged to go to the parent and kind of rat the student out, in effect, and say,
Well,
your
that's a different.
child. No,
I wouldn't use that.
that's exactly what needs to happen in these situations. The teacher would be forced legally, otherwise face the sort of risk of being prosecuted, that they tell the parent. Now, in cases like that, where you've got a parent who is, you know, no, in the most charitable way in the world, uh, gonna send that child to, um, I mean, some kind. There are children who end up dead in situations like that because they are forced into situations that make them so uncomfortable and so unhappy that they commit suicide. I mean, there's a long track record of that happening all
Absolutely.
over society. So the issue really, to my mind, is an issue of a student is entitled to their privacy. They're entitled to have certain things that don't make it back to their parents, for their safety, because we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a very, very imperfect world.
Yeah.
And that we want those children to stay alive, regardless of what they identify as. Is there anything in any of that you can object to?
No, I actually, first of all, I will say that you use the term ratting someone out, and I feel like that comes with a heavy derogatory. It comes as a negative. There are ways of approaching a parent without necessarily using the term ratting them out. There needs to be intervention, whether that's counseling or whatever.
But that still assumes this is still this from the students. Let's put it from the student's point of view.
Right.
They're children, right? So children do dumb stuff. Teachers learn things about students for all kinds of reasons, not necessarily because the student tells them directly.
Sure.
The teacher learns, the teacher is then legally obligated to inform. We'll take out the ratted phrase that is a bit freighted. They have to tell the parent. That parent is a fundamentalist Christian who then forces that child to go to, I don't know, like de-gaying club or whatever, or some other kind of thing, that shuns the child, or when you're talking about children who are in their later teens, that child may end up being forced out of the house. They may leave home. They may end up on the streets. And I'm not saying this as all hypotheticals. This happens already. These are things that happen regularly.
Okay, but this also it goes both ways. It goes both ways. We see now where it's no. I mean, I feel like there's a very big. Not meaning to use the term, but there's a transition from feminine boys and masculine girls. Oh, you must be trans. And I think that's where kids are, and I could be wrong, just speaking from my own personal experience, this is where kids are getting confused. When I was in high school, there was lots of masculine girls and feminine boys, and it didn't mean that they were the wrong gender. It just meant that that's how they were. And I think we came, and I could be wrong, but from my perspective, we came to an understanding that that's okay. Like, so what? You're a gay boy
Mhm.
and you're a gay girl and you don't follow the society norms of what a girl looks like, and that's okay. Like, who cares?
If
And
we're
then,
okay with that now, 30, 40
but
years
it
ago,
became,
our parents
oh,
would
you
have been
must.
saying exactly the same thing about, well, there's some agenda to make all our children gay. Well, now we're like, oh, it's
No,
fine. Children can be gay.
no. And if you, I don't know if you, like, I've spoken with some high school students who it's cool to be gay. I have a friend whose daughter was like, I think I'm gay. She's quite young to even have that conversation, I think. But, they had the conversation. Now she's, it's been a year or two and she's kind of come back around and on that and changed her decision on it. But it's whether you see it or not, it is a cool thing to be gay right now. And that's fine. Like, but it makes me wonder, there's a lot of social influence there. Why
That's society, really, isn't it? It's not government. I mean,
most
yeah, I
certainly,
find the kind of the pressure on children to
figure it out.
The pressure on them to be kind of sexually aware, sexually active, to maybe, to explore gender in a way that we never even considered. These are all pressures that I find troubling. I feel like, childhood is a time when you're kind of free of that stuff.
Yeah, it would be nice
seems
if they
to end
could
when
be,
you're
right?
So, like, I get the kind of concerns, and like, this is a world that I'm not
well,
I'm not
I'll tell
entirely
you that.
comfortable with. But
No,
but
and I agree, but I'll tell you this. I feel like this pressure of figuring out and confusion and, more people leaning to transitioning did start kind of open, that bubble opened when Kathleen introduced the new sex ed content.
But that sex ed content never even made it to the schools. I mean, it was abolished before it was.
Nope, it was
really
not.
that was not.
Nope.
You can't tell me that a global phenomenon that's happening across the world is down to the Ontario sex ed.
No, but I can tell you that the global phenomenon across the world influenced the Ontario curriculum. That this is what I mean by there are talking heads and leaders who are being told what to say and what to put in place, but there is an actual agenda, and I don't know why people are ignoring that. We can't ignore the UN and the WHO and the World Economic Forum because they are influencing, whether you want to admit it or not.
Okay.
They've admitted to it. Hold on, I'm going to finish this because this is important to me. It has made it to Ontario curriculum. Doug Ford promised when he was elected the first time that he would remove the sex ed curriculum, and he has not. And I'll tell you, in a school I'm aware of, there was a conversation in a grade 6 class where they were talking about oral sex. And a girl asked, okay, so what do you do? Do you swallow it? And the teacher said, yes, it's safe to swallow. Well, that kid went home and discussed that with her mother, who was unaware that this conversation was even going to happen. So each grade, each year, the teacher is supposed to send home a consent form so that the parent can either opt out. It's not opting in. It's a part of the curriculum, but you can opt out. Totally fair. This parent wasn't given that opportunity. And even myself, my son's in grade 5, I've never seen a letter come home asking if we would like to opt out. It's never, ever come home. My daughter in grade 2 did receive it. So that's when I was like, I've never seen this letter before. What is this about? So it has not been abolished. It is a part of our curriculum.
I'm not. I guess
grade 7, they talk about anal sex for reference, and that's where things start to open up.
7 plus 5 is, sorry, I didn't grow up in a Canadian system, so I always have to do the math. So it's about 13 years old, something like that.
Grade 7.
12.
That's 11, 12. Yeah.
Yeah, 11, 12.
I mean, yeah.
12-year-olds need to learn about that from their teacher.
Well, I'll tell you about 1970s.
They're not teaching about that.
I just told you what happened. They did teach about it.
If a question is asked, the teacher is equipped to how to respond.
The child wouldn't have asked the question if the subject wasn't brought up.
I'm not getting into it. I don't want to get into an anecdotal hearsay because what I do interested is your assertion at the UN, WHO, and all these things. If Pierre Poilievre was elected, would you want him to remove Canada from these organizations?
100% I would. Yep.
Do you think that's
going? Do you think is likely that he would do any of that?
I think that he has promised to at this point. He's already said that if any of his ministers attend the World Economic Forum, that he'll have them removed. And if he doesn't, there will be a mob quite like the convoy going after his ass just the way they did after Trudeau, because you can't make those promises. That's a big promise. People are very concerned about unelected, government bodies coming in and swooping in and influencing our democracy. You can't make those promises and then renege on them. And this is what I'm saying is why people are leaning. Okay. We're going to disagree on a lot of things, but I came on here to explain to you why people are leaning conservative. It's because there's a lot of policies that are in place, a lot of issues that are in place, a lot of issues happening because of outside influence. And Poilievre has made and probably because he hears people being annoyed by the World Economic Forum and the UN and the WHO, not necessarily because that's what he believes, but he tends to say what people want to hear, right? He's going for premier. Prime Minister.
On that note, are you worried that you're being played at all? Because
no matter who's in government,
okay,
on any level, we're all being played always. And this is why I always come back to, I don't necessarily align with a party. I'm probably never going to agree with a single party's objections or priorities overall.
Okay.
But I will lean where I need to lean, and I will vote where I need to vote when I see that there needs to be a change that needs to be made. So yes.
Okay. You know what? I mean, this conversation could go on. We could probably sit here all day and go back and forth over this. But I know you have a business to run, and our listeners are probably hopefully they're playing into their workplaces from their commutes as we speak. So I'm going to call an end to this episode now. I think it's been about an hour. So, but Kerri, thank you very much for coming on. Yeah, we could probably discuss a ton of stuff in detail.
Anytime you want to, we can pick this back up.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on.
It's outside of our bubble.
Yeah, well, our podcast is.
Can I ask you a question? Do you mind? Am I allowed to do that?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of, you say, we're very progressive. What in what terms? Like, what would you say is progressive that you would fight tooth and nail for? Because I honestly, I think I probably agree with a lot of things. We probably have a lot more in common than we have.
Okay. Here's. I'll put it in this way.
Sure.
I agree with your assertion that the parental rights, and for those listening on the podcast, I am using air quotes, is going to be a major factor in the next couple of elections. I'm very much believe in protecting trans students, trans rights. I think it's far too nuanced for the government to get involved. I equate it to a woman's rights to choose. Government shouldn't be involved. It's between a doctor and the child. There are safeguards in place to prevent. It's not. I don't buy it that it's this impulsive decision. It's a journey. Things that I don't necessarily understand and I don't get. I kind of look and say that's weird, but I'm also of the mindset of it's you. You do your thing. It's not impacting me, and I don't think there's harm there. Any harm, it's a minor thing, and I don't think anyone's being forced to do it. My worry is this with Pierre Poilievre is I don't think he's going to be able to accomplish anything that he wants to get done. I really don't. I think he's too confrontational. He's too antagonistic, and I think for the provincial premiers are going to fight back with him on things. The mayors in the 905, I know for a fact, are going to fight him on everything. And that's thinking at the end of the day, everything that he's promising to get done won't get done because he's just not a likable guy. People don't want to sit down and say, all right, let's hammer this out. Like the conversation that we're having right now, Kerri, I'll put it this way. We've asked Pierre Poilievre and Melissa Lantsman and a number of other conservative MPs to come on and have this conversation. You have more courage to come on and talk to us than any of them do. And
Thanks.
I find, well, no, but that tells me something about them. It tells me a lot about you. And quite frankly, I am impressed that you came on here, and clearly we do not see eye to eye on a lot of things.
Yeah, but, and hopefully you feel that we've treated you. It is really important because we've hopefully you feel we've treated you and your opinions respectfully at every single point. And I think we've had a really good interesting conversation. And I don't think at any point
But
either
I just don't.
of us were saying to you or you were saying to us, no, you're an idiot. That's just ridiculous. I mean, we push back, but that's what having a political debate is, right?
But I just don't. I just don't see him being
and we can't
collaborative
get
to build
that with
to
them.
build that. And when that falls apart, my worry is that it's going to be so easy to go to trans students who are going through something. They're dealing with something on their own, and I think it's a matter of just saying, you deal with it, and the parents who are supporting them, let them support them and let them go through it, and just get out of the way. My worry is it's going to be so easy to say, no, it's the woke. And I don't like the term woke because I think it's too encompassing. It's too murky. It's not an actual group. It's just, what is woke? It's whatever I don't agree with. And I can say, you don't like it. I don't think we'll get rid of, and that's why I don't like Pierre Poilievre.
And to sort of have my turn.
But that being said, I also understand why you don't like Justin Trudeau. And I'm not going to say that you're wrong for not liking him, because what you said, I get some things. There are things that he's done that I don't like. I think we need a UBI. That's being said. I think. I mean,
I don't think either of us would defend any political leader at this point.
No,
I think that's exactly the point here. Is that
but there is? I mean, there's a difference why we lean progressive. I mean, if I can just sort of answer the question you asked a few minutes ago, what makes me progressive? It's because the things it's really a matter of priorities, right? I don't think the priorities that I'm hearing from Pierre Poilievre reflect what should be the priorities in Canada right now. If we're talking about employing people, about having people who are well educated, people who are having jobs for people, having houses to live in, I don't hear anything that he's saying that, to me, speaks about solving those issues. I hear a lot about things like woke culture and immigration, and kind of what, to me, I believe sound an awful lot like dog whistles, ways of getting people to vote for you, creating a moral panic around something like trans issues. And I find the trans debate challenging. It's something new to me. I didn't grow up with it. I don't entirely understand it. I'm willing to admit that. I get it. It's a challenge to me, right? What I won't do is let any political leader manipulate that feeling into a vote for them, when I don't really think that's what the federal government should be worrying about. The federal government should be trying to do things that employ people. Now, I'm a fan of government spending because I think, and I own a business. I've been running a business for 20 years now. So I guess that means it's kind of a success. And I never had a penny of government money, or hardly a penny of government money in all that time.
Yeah.
Done it all myself. Yeah. And so all those good conservative principles, and yet I think government spending is a fantastic thing for the economy usually, because using people's tax to invest in a better nation through education, through universities, through spending and getting new businesses started up is what they should be doing. And we've spoken for an hour now, and we hardly talked about those issues. Yeah. Even as business owners ourselves, we hardly talked about these issues. We talked about trans rights. We talked about what happened 3 years ago during COVID.
But to be fair, the question was, why are people leaning conservative?
Yeah. No, I'm not criticizing that. We talked about the issues that are absolutely at the forefront of the political debate right now, and I suspect are going to decide who wins the next election. And it's like, why am I progressive? Because I don't actually think those are the issues we should be talking about, but we are, and that's the world we're in, So, Kerri, I think, we both really appreciate you coming on. It's been a fun debate, and we can tell that from the fact this is probably the longest episode we've ever done.
Yeah.
Let's do this again sometime.
It's because I'm a Sicilian. I could talk all day. Let's just.
Yeah. We really appreciate, having our own opinions challenged. We appreciate your willingness to come on and discuss. It's been fun, and thank you.
Thank you.
We wish we could let's hope you're the first of many people who are willing to come on and challenge our own comfortable opinions.
I just want to say, to end this, I didn't expect to come on here to challenge anyone. I think it's important for democracy for everyone to vote based on who they think will better support their individual family views. And I just think that people are leaning more conservative now, honestly, because of the failures of the Trudeau government. And that seems to be what happens in elections, is we flip-flop back and forth based on the failures rather than the winnings.
I think we can all 100% agree on that statement.
Yeah.
But on that note, Roland, hit the end button. We're going to put this one in the can. Thank you very much, Kerri.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
I'm Matt Kundle, host of the Sound Off Podcast, the show about podcast and broadcast. Since 2016, we've been speaking with amazing people who have populated your ears for decades. Legendary broadcasters, research wizards, talent experts, podcasters, voice talent. Almost 400 stories, all for free. Subscribe or follow the Sound Off Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at soundoffpodcast.com.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Emily Roger, and I host a leadership show called The Boiling Point with my co-host, Dave Vale. Together, we sit down with trailblazing entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and movement makers who are driving meaningful change in our world. The show is all about exploring the lives and perspectives of leaders who are making a difference. Join us for insightful conversations that challenge the status quo, spark new ideas, and inspire you to take action. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or at boilingpointpodcast.com.